Welcome to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation CF Education Day webcast, What Might Happen in a CF Clinical Trial. I'm Cindy George, Director of Clinical Research Resources at the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. This webcast is hosted by the CF Foundation and supported through an unrestricted educational grant from Genentech. Joining me today to talk about what might happen in a CF clinical trial are Warren and Lindsay Love and Dr. David Ornstein, or as he's affectionately known, as Dr. O. Warren and Lindsay are parents of a child with CF, and Dr. Ornstein is the Antonio J. and Janet Palumbo Professor of Cystic Fibrosis and co-director of the CF Center at the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh of UPMC. Welcome, Warren, Lindsay, and Dr. O. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Warren and Lindsay, why don't we get started, because I think you've had a first question for Dr. O.
Sure. Dr. O, why would we consider enrolling our child in a CF clinical study?
Well, there are a few reasons, and probably the main reason is you guys know very well that the outlook for patients with CF has improved dramatically over the last decades, and yet we still have a ways to go. We don't have a cure, we don't have the perfect treatment for patients with CF, and you also know that the only way we're going to get that is for actual real live patients with CF to participate in clinical trials so that we can test promising new therapies so that one day we will have those treatments for your son and for all the other patients with CF.
Dr. O, the Love's child is fairly young. What if I'm a teenager? Why would I want to do a clinical trial? What's in it for me?
Sure, that's a great question. And of course, some of the same things are in it for a teenager or an adult, as would be in it for the Love's young son, and that is the knowledge that you're helping move forward the science and getting closer to a cure and better treatment. Also, though, sometimes teenagers need a little bit more incentive, shall we say, to jump in, and the fact that there very often is financial incentive in there, that patients who participate in many of these trials do get paid some money for it, that can get a teenager's ears tuned in to what's about to be said. So in addition to knowing that they're helping move the science along, getting closer to better treatment and a cure, for some teenagers and young adults, the knowledge that they might be able to get some money to buy some things that they wanted helps them get enthusiastic about the research.
Thank you. Warren and Lindsay, what concerns did you have when you were considering enrolling your son in a clinical trial, and how were those addressed, if you could answer that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, probably the first one would be the safety of the study. You know, we were dealing with an infant at the time and wanted to make sure that we weren't going to be exposing him to something that could harm him. Another thing was time. How long would it take, in addition to his existing treatments, to perform every day?
And the way we dealt with those was with the side effects and potentially, being a dangerous situation for him. Everything was explained very thoroughly before we began. We did some of our own research, and then the research coordinators and the doctors were always there to answer any questions we had, and everything was very thoroughly explained before we began. And then for time, we kind of got creative sometimes with time by waking up early or having his babysitter during the day help us. And then we also were able to do things like with his albuterol treatment, we used to give it to him with a nebulizer, but we were able to switch to an inhaler to save time that way because we were doing additional treatments for a study. So the staff was able to work with us to kind of help coordinate the clinic visits and the study visits. We were able to combine those so that we were able to meet at the same time, so it wasn't additional trips into the hospital. We were able to complete everything at once.
Great. And Dr. O, what might a person or a parent of a child who wants to enroll someone into a CF clinical trial, what might they expect?
Well, they can expect different things depending on what the particular trial is. There are several different kinds of trials. There are intervention trials where we are actually giving some kind of treatment. We're intervening, giving some kind of treatment to the child. That might be a drug trial, a promising new medication that comes along. It might be just an observational trial where we're just following along and seeing how a particular group of patients does over time. And for those kinds of trials, there will be different kinds of things to expect. There will be almost certainly more testing than would be done just for the clinical care of the child. There might be extra blood tests. There might be extra throat cultures or sputum cultures. There might be extra breathing tests. All of our patients who are old enough to cooperate do get breathing tests or pulmonary function tests at every clinic visit. There might be more of those for someone who's in a study. There can be other intervention kinds of trials other than just drugs. There are exercise intervention trials. And obviously you would expect something different for that kind of trial than you would for just an observational trial.
Thank you. Can you talk about your perspective about why you enrolled your son in a clinical trial?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we knew very early that our son had cystic fibrosis, and we made it a priority to learn as much as we could and to help where we could.
I think, as Dr. O had mentioned earlier, there's so few people in the country with cystic fibrosis that we really feel like if we want to find a cure for our son, we need to participate in that, and that it can only really help him get better the more research that they have. So we really just felt that it was important, and we want to instill that in him as well as he gets older, that it's important for him to participate when he's old enough to make that decision for himself, that he wants to play an active role in that.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent perspective that you have, and it's I love seeing how you've arrived at that. I think more people are coming to understand that if you have a problem like hypertension, high blood pressure, or diabetes, or asthma, there are millions of other people out there that have that condition, and you can say, let them do the study. Whereas with CF, with only 30,000 patients ranging in age from 0 to in their 70s, that's a very few patients, only 30,000 of them in the country, and that's a very few patients to select from, to get volunteers from in order to participate in these trials. So it's very important that everybody keep in mind that they have a potential role to play. And you guys have come to that understanding early on. That's great.
Warren and Lindsay, I'd like to just go back a second. You mentioned that you worked about how to fit in the additional treatment on a daily basis. How did you manage to fit this overall trial into your personal and work life?
Well, a lot of it was getting up early to do it then, or to fit it in before dinner. The other thing that was available to us was we had a support staff with our families too. Like my wife had mentioned, the babysitter. She was very valuable for some of these studies since she had them for the beginning of the day every day. That was probably the biggest thing, was just making the time available, making it the priority. That was the day-to-day stuff. And then with the study in the hospital and things along that, they helped.
Yeah, they were able to help schedule appointments. They worked around our work schedule. A lot of times we were able to get later appointments so that we didn't have to take off work, or early morning appointments. We would get the first appointment in the morning so that we could get there early and then go to work. And they just really the staff tried to work with us in order to fit in any extra appointments or things that were needed for that study.
Yeah, another thing, if I can add in, one of the things we try very hard to do, and usually are successful in doing, is study visits. That is, visits that wouldn't necessarily be needed for the clinical care of a patient. We try to coordinate those with a regular clinic visit, so it's not 1 week you come in for your clinic visit and whoops, next week back you are for the study visit. We try to combine those whenever we can.
Well, it's a big commitment. It sounds like you both work together quite well. Our last question is really for both of you, or all of you, I should say. What is one key point that parents or a person with CF who wants to be in a CF clinical trial should know about? What should they anticipate would happen?
Well, I think that from our perspective, having a small child, we were fearful when we began that Being in a clinical study, it sounds so serious, and little kids are unpredictable, and things that happen are always unpredictable. And so we were concerned with that, and what we found was when an ear infection came up or something came up that wasn't supposed to be part of the study, that it was fine. And we would call the numbers that they gave us to call and let the research coordinator know or the nurse know, hey, this happened, and they would tell us exactly what to do, whether that be just recorded in the logbook or they would take note of it, and then they just kind of took care of the rest, and we just went about what we were supposed to be doing and taking care of our child. So they made it very easy to fit in with small children. They made it so that we could kind of go about our normal lives, and it wasn't a huge interference, you would want to say.
And I think another thing that everybody should understand when they go into a clinical trial is the number of levels that are built in for the safety of the patient who's participating. None of the CF docs around the country or around the world, I'm confident, would agree for their CF center to be participating in a trial if they weren't convinced themselves that it was quite safe. Before it's been presented to us as CF center directors, hey, here's a trial for you, it's gone through a number of layers of safety checks. And after the study has started and when the study is going on, there are experts around the country, review boards that are looking at the data that come in well before the study has finished to make sure that that it's continuing to be safe as we anticipated that it was. These boards have the power to say, we have to stop this study if it's looking that it's not safe, or in some unusual but very happy cases, we're going to stop this study early because it's so clear that this new medicine, let's say, is so much better than the old medicine that we've proven it and we can stop now. So there are a number of layers of safety built into a study.
I think one of the important things to remember also, especially initially starting off on a trial, is that you're not alone with this. They don't just walk in and hand you a book and say, here, you're going to take these and fill this out. There's a lot of people who talk to you every time you come in for a visit. If you have any questions, you ask them, and they're very quick to get back with you a response. Most of it's immediately. And that's the biggest thing to remember, is that you don't have to worry about having this great big knowledge base in your head when you start out the study, that there is people there to help you.
Thank you, Warren, Lindsay, and Dr. O for sharing your thoughts about what might happen in a clinical trial. You can learn more about CF clinical research on the Foundation's website under About Clinical Trials. From this page, you can link to subsections such as Frequently Asked Questions about Clinical Trials, where you can download a brochure, or listen to what people with CF, family members, and research members have to say about participating in CF clinical trials, as well as search for clinical trials. In the Clinical Trial Search tool, you can search for CF trials by using the basic search method. This allows you to view trials by their stage of recruitment: not yet recruiting, recruiting, recruiting completed, or trial completed. Results of trials are posted as they are made public by the trial sponsor. Or you can narrow your search by using the advanced search. This allows you to search by age, FEV1, state, or by keywords. Sign up to receive clinical trial email alerts when a trial is posted and when clinical trial results are available. You can also see the progress of drugs on the CF Foundation's drug development pipeline. Some additional features on this interactive pipeline include the ability to view related news and clinical trials about the drugs. This concludes the CF Foundation CF Education Day. I would like to thank you for watching the CF Education Day, Warren and Lindsay Love and Dr. David Orenstein for joining us today, Rick Vasta and the technical crew, Melissa Kennedy and Leslie Hazel, the CF Foundation for making this broadcast possible, and Genentech for the unrestricted educational grant. Thank you.